Before we get started, I have a quick favor. I've been self-funding the Finding Genius podcast for 5 years now. I've done over 3,000 episodes. And as you can see on YouTube, we're up over 1 million views on the channel, which is fantastic. The next thing I really want to push on is to get up to 10,000 subscribers. Because once we do, we'll be able to put a donate button and we'll be able to solicit donations to help keep the podcast running and to also get the Finding Genius Foundation moving along. We have a big project studying anxiety, depression, and PTSD and working on a product to help people overcome these problems because I've seen them explode recently after the last 2 years of the whole virus situation. So if you would, please subscribe to the podcast. That would help us tremendously. Give us a thumbs up and check in the description for Buy Me a Coffee. It's about $5. If you could buy me a coffee, I'd really appreciate it. It would help keep the channel going, and I love coffee. Thank you. The Daily Tonic is a 5-minute newsletter that shares science-backed health news and tips, all while getting you to crack a smile or even laugh out loud on occasion. It's a daily morning newsletter started by wellness lovers for wellness lovers that covers everything from diet and exercise to morning routines and sleep aids. To subscribe, go to 247health.com and click on the Daily Tonic button at the top of the webpage. When you go to 247health.com to subscribe to the Daily Tonic newsletter, be sure to check out their product reviews and special recipes. There you can find reviews on the latest health technology that will improve your performance, your recovery, and your longevity. 247health.com believes that wellness is a personal journey, but it's always good to have a friend who knows what they're talking about too. Give them a try at 247health.com. Did you know many of 247health.com's favorite products, like avocado oil mayonnaise, hydrating ketone water, skin revitalizing red light lamps, all are featured on the Daily Tonic with discount codes? If you see a cool new product on the website, there's probably a special link on the Daily Tonic. Plus, the Daily Tonic also features new wellness products with special discounts every single day. To subscribe, go to 247health.com and click on the Daily Tonic button at the top of the webpage.
Forget frequently asked questions,
common sense, common knowledge, or Google.
How about advice from a real genius? 95% of people in any profession are good enough to be qualified and licensed. 5%
go above and beyond.
They become very good at what they do, but only
0.1%
are real geniuses. Richard Jacobs has made it his life's mission to find them for you. He hunts down and interviews geniuses in every field: sleep science, cancer, stem cells, ketogenic diets, and more. Here come the geniuses. This is the Finding Genius Podcast
with Richard Jacobs.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius Podcast, now part of the Finding Genius Foundation. I have Sunny Jain. He's the CEO and founder of Sun Genomics. And we're going to talk about probiotics that they make that are tailored to your particular gut. So, Sunny, thanks for coming. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Richard. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about the new frontier of health and wellness, and that's the gut science and the microbes in our gut with you today.
Yeah, it seems like there's a whole bunch of companies that have been in the space for a while. What compelled you to get into the space, and what's new and different about your work?
Yeah, I've been following genomics all my career, past 25 years, and I love to be on the forefront of the new molecular diagnostic tests. I had the good fortune of sequencing the first clinical whole genome when whole genome sequencing was really hot. And that was while I was working for Illumina. And I also had the good fortune of developing lots of molecular oncology tests as that wave of molecular diagnostics came out, including like BCR-ABL and T-cell and B-cell clonality assays. And then when SNPs were really hot, I was working and making panels for a small company that got acquired by Quest. So my background is in microbiology, but it's kind of come full circle here, taking molecular medicine, molecular biology, and mixing it with microbiology, and you find yourself looking at the microbiome. And that's kind of where my career path led me. But on a personal note, it really started because my son was having gut health issues, and we wanted to find a solution for him. And that's where I put my scientist hat on and started analyzing his stool.
Okay. So what's different and unique about, I've had probiotic, plenty of them, refrigerated, non-refrigerated. This one has 80 billion, this one has 10 different genes, et cetera. Were you able to navigate, what was available and to figure out what was needed that wasn't available.
Yeah, it's confusing, right? I mean, you go to the store, I call it the wall of probiotic confusion. You get there, you're going to be frozen for about 5 to 10 minutes looking at all the options. Maybe you'll take the leap and flip over the bottle and take a look at the ingredients, and then you'll read a bunch of Latin terms that don't make a lot of sense. Bifidobacterium infantis, Bifidobacterium lactis, Lactobacillus rhamnosus. I mean, really what the manufacturer is trying to do is indicate these cellular organisms, these bacteria, that are going to go into our bodies and release something beneficial. Unfortunately, the way that the consumer is engaging that product today, it's uber confusing, and we don't really have a solid rationale for why those strains were put together and why that's going to help you, other than a general idea that probiotics are good for our health. And so I didn't feel comfortable giving that to my son, and I didn't feel like that was the right way to go, because your gut has thousands of microbes in it and got trillions of microbial cells. You're going to need to understand what's in the gut first to understand what good things to feed it and take to improve the gut.
Yeah, and then also, depending on what you take, you want it to survive until it gets to the gut. And then how do you know it won't be outcompeted by what's already in the gut?
And the answer is test yourself, right? You do that in almost every other paradigm. Whenever you're looking for a health solution, first thing you do is, test yourself. If you're starting to run a marathon, the first thing you do is you test how fast can you run that first mile or 3 miles. If you're going to go work on reducing your cholesterol, we're going to go get your cholesterol checked first, right? If you're working on blood sugar, you're going to check your A1C levels. Well, no, it's no different with gut microbiome. The first thing you should do is not go for the solution, but first check what the microbial composition is of your gut and then chart a path forward. And that's what we do at Flore, is help people see that. And oftentimes for the first time, the transparency of the gut microbes and what are the good ones, what are the bad ones, how can they improve the good ones, and how can they feel better? Yeah,
I remember I had my gut bacteria sampled years ago by a company that's now defunct, but I didn't really get any information back. They said, oh, you have this species, that species. Okay, what do I do with that? What can I do to affect it? What does this species mean? What does the reporting look like today, and how much better is it?
Well, just like any industry, there's always a lot of hype at the beginning, and then we become centered and more grounded and still chart a path forward. And thankfully, the science all has remained valid. Nothing has changed other than there are tens of thousands of more publications and scientific understanding of the underlying benefits and issues that gut microbes can cause. And now researchers have shown that specific species of gut microbes could be related to why people can't process sugar as well, or particular species could be associated with our metabolism, and particular species of organisms could be associated with things even as far stretched as gut-brain axis and autism spectrum disorder and neurological conditions. So we've really evolved the science. And one huge difference between what we do at Sun Genomics is that we use a method called whole genome sequencing. And this method allows us to read all the A's, C's, G's, and T's of that microbial sample, and that gives us the highest resolution understanding of what's going on. It sounds like, Richard, you probably got something on the early end of things where people were just looking at short segments and using things like PCR instead of DNA sequencing. And PCR can be great for a quick answer, but it doesn't have very good resolution, and it's really variable. And that's why they couldn't give you all the information you needed. But now things have dramatically changed in 2022, and you can get species, strain level, you can understand fungi, yeast, viruses, what is it doing? We provide all the references to the public domain on all the scientific publications around those organisms. We have some helpful videos that you can also review to understand things better. And then we have a team of scientists that live this information day in and day out, so people don't have to Google information, and they produce concise ways to understand your microbiome.
The Daily Tonic is a 5-minute newsletter that shares science-backed health news and tips, all while getting you to crack a smile or even laugh out loud on occasion. It's a daily morning newsletter started by wellness lovers for wellness lovers that covers everything from diet and exercise to morning routines and sleep aids. To subscribe, go to 247health.com and click on the Daily Tonic button at the top of the webpage. When you go to 247health.com to subscribe to the Daily Tonic newsletter, be sure to check out their product reviews and special recipes. There you can find reviews on the latest health technology that will improve your performance, your recovery, and your longevity. 247health.com believes that wellness is a personal journey, but it's always good to have a friend who knows what they're talking about too. Give them a try at 247health.com. Did you know many of 247health.com's favorite products, like avocado oil mayonnaise, hydrating ketone water, skin revitalizing red light lamps, all are featured on the Daily Tonic with discount codes? If you see a cool new product on the website, there's probably a special link on the Daily Tonic. Plus, the Daily Tonic also features new wellness products with special discounts every single day. To subscribe, go to 247health.com and click on the Daily Tonic button at the top of the webpage.
Oh, okay. So in your reporting, you'll show a lot more than I used to see. And you're right, it was many years ago. I had thought the law prevented a lot of, or any advice being given and a lot of insight. I don't know if the law has changed and you're able to provide more insight to people or other companies that are able to provide it.
Yeah, it still is a wellness product, right? So what we focus on the consumer side is general health and wellness, and that could include dietary recommendations, right? Eating more cruciferous vegetables or legumes or whatever microbes that might benefit from those types of essentially prebiotics. We can provide that recommendation. Then you can research for yourselves on these different conditions. You can also compare yourselves to our general population and healthy population. So there's a lot more content and information today, thankfully, to some amazing researchers that have published in this space. But we don't guide a diagnosis or anything like that. That's more on our clinical side. And we do have a clinical component to what we do at Sun Genomics. We have 2 active clinical trials, one in IBS, one in autism spectrum disorder. And we're about to do a 3rd clinical here shortly. So we definitely are contributing on the clinical side as well. But there's so much information on the consumer side already. We want to give people a head start and the transparency to what's in their gut.
Yeah, so why do consumers consume your product? What are some of the things that you're able to possibly affect in people?
Yeah, it's been pretty tremendous to read these stories coming from trustpilot.com or even to our website on flora.com. You can read these stories about people that have had long-standing diagnostic odysseys, right? People that are just can't figure out what's wrong with them. Either they're suffering from IBS symptoms or they have IBD and they're trying to manage that, or they have a GERD symptom or some allergies or asthma or an autoimmune applied type of condition, possibly rheumatoid arthritis, and they're giving us so much amazing feedback on these customer reviews. One customer in particular stands out where they had been on a diagnostic odyssey for 3 years plus and tried everything, tried all the other tests that their doctors had been ordering and tried all the kombucha they could handle and all the fermented foods. It just wasn't getting them anywhere because it wasn't specific enough, right? It was driving the wrong change in their microbiome. And then this customer gave us a raving review about how it changed her life, how it was able to get her back into exercising, allow her to eat a variety of more foods, and really just change the energy levels that she had so that she could now go back to doing the things that she loved doing. So that's just one example, but we've had some really amazing results from the autism spectrum disorder study as well. People posting about their children that have gone from nonverbal to verbal now, which is an amazing thing for a parent. Even a 0.5% improvement can be impactful. And we're learning so much more about the importance of gut microbiome health early on and in these children with ASD as well. And we'll be sharing that soon with our researchers and our partners. So we're excited for that. But there's so many more, and you can check them out on trustpilot.com.
So what are some of the customization that people can experience? What's customized and how?
So we're unique in the sense that we're 100% customized. So we're not pulling from a combination of things in the back inventory and putting them together as packets. We are genuinely pulling powders and compounding the ingredients that you need. So it includes probiotics, prebiotics, and botanicals all in a single pill solution that's made just for you. And through our mobile application, as well as the stickers that come on your packaging, you'll be able to see all the ingredients that are built just for you. And you can get a health goal call with our scientific liaison to just better understand why those ingredients were chosen and how that relates to your microbiome and what changes to expect.
But can you give a little bit of insight? I know everyone's different, but why would person A get different things from person B? Like, what are some of the factors people have that would cause you to give them a different mixture?
Yeah, good question. So one of the things is what their starting point is to begin with. So some people are in an active dysbiosis and they're trying to deal with SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And if we find that SIBO patient has an overgrowth of E. coli, E. coli is a unique organism, but there's a particular strain of probiotic that fights E. coli really well. They have clinical studies showing that it brings down E. coli. And so we utilize that strain in that person's formula and then monitor them to see if the E. coli concentration does indeed drop after retesting. And we're really good at that type of scenario. Now, the SIBO could be caused by different organisms. It doesn't always have to be E. coli. Some people have the hydrogen releasing organisms or the methane releasing organisms. You may have heard of Methanobacter, or you may have heard the term Akkermansia. Some of these are also contributing to SIBO and causing people to feel unwell from that gas release. And so all we need to do is look at, okay, well, what do those organisms feed on? How do we deprive that nutrient source? Or what probiotics do we have in inventory that can outcompete the growth of those organisms so that we reduce the concentration? And that's really how the rationale goes. Another example is my nephew had an organism in his gut, and it wasn't E. coli, it was Klebsiella. And to treat the Klebsiella, they used a different set of probiotics, and it was targeted towards infant probiotics as opposed to adults. And so just being able to customize at that level, depending on where you are in life or what the situation is really important. And it's nearly impossible to do that from standing in front of a refrigerator in a retail store.
Yeah, how do you know which bacteria will produce which needed metabolite? Do you look at like metagenomics, or how do you analyze this?
Yeah, what we do is called metagenomics. It's looking at every microbe of the gut and the DNA sequence of that. On the research side, we are also able to look at the capabilities and the functional capabilities of these organisms, whether or not they're producing things like short-chain fatty acids and butyrate and healthy levels of molecules in the gut that will heal gut lining and solve for things like leaky gut that you hear about, where people have a gut lining disruption and potentially things that they're eating or exposed to in the environment are getting through the gut lining and into the bloodstream. We want to be able to make sure that the organisms of the gut are building those healthy molecules inside of the gut as well. So that is one consideration as well. And that's information that you can also look and research up on the portal as you read through more information.
How much of an effect is the compatriots of the bacteria that are in there? So if you have bacteria A, but you also have B, C, and D, how do they affect the function of A? And when you introduce something that will outcompete A, let's say, how do you account for these, maybe these cross interactions? I don't know if there is a ton of them or a little.
Yeah, there's something called, in general, gut ecology, right? We're trying to understand the entire ecosystem of organisms. And originally people thought, if you have this one organism, then you just need to solve for that. And largely that's what the pharmaceutical industry and pharma are currently doing, is looking at, okay, if you have C. difficile, let's target C. difficile. If you have high levels of C. diff, let's target that. And that's where a lot of the live bacteria therapeutics are currently targeting. What it doesn't look at is, okay, what are the other organisms around that C. difficile? Was it really a chronically level of C. difficile infection? There are organisms like Faecalibacterium prausnitzii that produce lots of strong butyrate molecules for the gut that can actually help you manage high levels of pathogens and toxins that are being produced in the gut. So it's really about balance. How much of that Enterobacteriaceae or that Clostridium organism that's inflammatory do you have in the gut relative to these quenching organisms that are like the butyrate producers or the postbiotic producers. And looking at those ratios is really important. So we come up with a score called the Sun Genomics microbiome score that kind of assesses these types of ratios. And we've got some other scores in there as well, looking at more wellness factors that people can look at, what we call the sub-scores, just to understand how things are in the gut and try to keep it as simple as we can.
You said you're able to see, I guess, the phagome, the fungome, et cetera. How much of an effect are you seeing that, various fungi or phages are having on, gut composition in people? Or is it so complicated it's hard to figure that out?
It's definitely complicated. And I think there's still a lot to go on that research, but we're at a really good starting point, right? We have housed some of the world's first data related to this because of our methodology. And I can say anecdotally, without having aggregated the data at this point to its entirety, we do detect those organisms in individuals. And the question is, what impact is it having on those individuals? And we detect them in particular scenarios where they've reported back particular environments they've been in or particular things that they're taking. So it's interesting to learn that and makes us begin to question how do we take food safety better? How do we take our environment safety better? So we're hoping that will translate into those changes down the road. But right now, it's still in the research aggregation mode.
Okay. One more question, I guess, is kind of a question I've had for a while. Is I call it bacterial economics. If I have a bacteria that produces a short-chain fatty acid and it wants a sugar molecule, who or what decides? Is it a 1-to-1 trade, a 3-to-1, a 10-to-1? How is that figured out? How would you imagine that happens?
Yeah, you got to start somewhere. That's the first thing. So the first place to start is to kind of look at who's done the clinical work on this. So if you have a particular oligosaccharide, as you're talking about, the long chain sugars, to want to feed these organisms. So not the simple sugars like the glucose or fructose. Those are not going to be good for your gut. Those are going to feed C. difficile. But these long chain oligosaccharides that are sometimes categorized as fibers, you can feed organisms of the gut those molecules to stimulate their growth. Now, bifidobacterium are a type of organism, Infantis in particular, and lactis in particular, do digest those oligosaccharides well. But there are other organisms of the gut that can benefit from that as well. And so what we've done is create a predictive model. We use something called Flore AI. It's a success manager. And over the last 6 years, we've been collecting feedback from our patients on how particular, or customers, I should say, on how particular ingredients have benefited them, meaning they will send us a survey back indicating if we gave them an oligosaccharide, did it benefit them? Did they feel good? Did they feel worse? Did it benefit? Did it resolve their issues? That feeds back into what we call a success manager. The success manager then applies some AI algorithms to then continue to use those same ingredients when those similar scenarios are reported into the system. And over time, we build out high levels of success on ingredients and filter out the ingredients that don't really work or don't really help improve people the way they're feeling.
And how do you know how much to give somebody? I don't know how you express it in terms of, the number of bacteria in a capsule or a powder, but how do you know if you're going to give them too much or not enough? How can you tell?
Yeah, that's all usually set by the manufacturers from their standard clinical trials that they run on safety and efficacy around the ingredient. And of course, all of the ingredients have graphs and safety information available on what the dosage should be. And so we utilize that as the first step. And if it's not effective or causing issues, customers are always able to reformulate. That's the beauty of having this custom reformulation process is if it's unaccounted for or unknown that you have a particular sensitivity, don't worry about that. That's what we're here for. We can actually just craft the next formula and redo it for you without that ingredient. And sometimes customers are learning that for the first time. And sometimes there's a die-off period that they may experience as well as they get used to ingredients. So we can lower the dose for individuals that have that and then bring them back up. There's a lot of customization and individualization that happens with the product that we offer. This is essentially precision supplements, right? This is a precision approach to dialing that in so that it is really built for the N of one and optimized to you.
Hey, you mentioned the die-off period. I know people that have had let's say H. pylori, and when they try to change over their bacteria, the die-off period can make them significantly sick for, I guess when the bacteria die. Have you guys had the need to address that, and how would you address it if so?
Yeah, we have this really good blog. I believe Shireen, scientific liaison, wrote it on the Hertz reaction in the gut system, and it talks about this die-off period that sometimes may occur because you can imagine, if you're going in to evict some of the residents in the house, they're going to put up a fight, and they do put up a fight, and they may release inflammatory microbes, and they may react to the incoming beneficial probiotics or the botanical ingredients that we're providing. They're using their sensors to detect other organisms that are creeping into their space, and they're going to release molecules to stop them from creeping into their space. And that's called competitive inhibition. And so, the thing is to get over that competitive inhibition hump. And once you do, you kind of filter out the dying organisms and then replace them with a healthier gut microbiota. I mean, a perfect time where you see that happen is right after taking antibiotics. There are two things that can happen right after taking antibiotics, right? It's free territory, and either your bad organisms are going to grow, which love to grow fast after antibiotics, or you're going to get your good organisms to grow and rebuild the healthy microbiota. So how do you skew it towards the good organisms? Well, don't eat sugars right after taking antibiotics. Don't drink a bunch of sugar or eat a bunch of desserts, because that's going to feed all the inflammatory microbes of the gut, the enterobacteria, the clostridiums. Think about diets that are rich in cruciferous vegetables and polyphenols and legumes and lentils, because that's going to feed all the healthy microbes of the gut. And by doing so, you're going to inhibit the inflammatory microbes. So it's all about this sort of inhibitory reaction against these organisms that you want to have die off.
Very good. Well, Sunny, so for for clinical applications and also for just consumer applications, where can people find out more? Where do they go?
They can find us on flore.com, flore.com. You can see the consumer side pretty clearly. The clinical side, you do have to dig a little bit, but if you have any questions on the clinical side, you can always reach out to customer service at Sun Genomics, SUNGENOMICS.com, and they will be able to assist and direct you to the right people.
Very good. Sunny, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate you too, Richard, and thanks for having me.
The Daily Tonic is a 5-minute newsletter that shares science-backed health news and tips, all while getting you to crack a smile or even laugh out loud on occasion. It's a daily morning newsletter started by wellness lovers for wellness lovers that covers everything from diet and exercise to morning routines and sleep aids. To subscribe, go to 247health.com and click on the Daily Tonic button at the top of the webpage. When you go to 247health.com to subscribe to the Daily Tonic newsletter, be sure to check out their product reviews and special recipes. There you can find reviews on the latest health technology that will improve your performance, your recovery, and your longevity. 247health.com believes that wellness is a personal journey, but it's always good to have a friend who knows what they're talking about too. Give them a try at 247health.com. Did you know many of 247health.com's favorite products, like avocado oil mayonnaise, hydrating ketone water, skin revitalizing red light lamps, all are featured on the Daily Tonic with discount codes? If you see a cool new product on the website, there's probably a special link on the Daily Tonic. Plus, the Daily Tonic also features new wellness products with special discounts every single day. To subscribe, go to 247health.com and click on the Daily Tonic button at the top of the webpage.
You've been listening to the Finding Genius podcast with Richard Jacobs. If you like what you hear, be sure to review and subscribe to the Finding Genius podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And want to be smarter than everybody else? Become a premium member at findinggeniuspodcast.com. This podcast is for information only. No advice of any kind is being given. Any action you take or don't take as a result of listening is your sole responsibility. Consult professionals when advice is needed.